Welcome everybody to the Friday ITS Davis Seminar Series, otherwise known as TTP 281. I'm Susan Handy for anybody who doesn't yet know me, and I will be your host for the quarter. So we've got a special seminar today. What we're going to do is a very quick introduction to all of the various centers and programs and initiatives housed within the Institute of Transportation Studies. So we've got a whole bunch of different people who are going to come on and share with you a little bit about what they're doing. And it's going to be my job, very challenging job, to make sure they don't talk too much because we want to hear from a lot of different people. But first, we need to do a little bit of some intro to TTP 281 and expectations and how this is all going to work. So next slide. So we have a whole wonderful lineup of speakers for you throughout the quarter, except I think we skipped the very last Friday. Is that right, Anne-Marie? Anyway, wonderful lineup. I am really excited. The fact that we're doing this remotely let us bring in people from much farther afield than we normally would be able to if we were meeting in person. So there's some downsides to doing this online, but there's some upsides to doing this online as well. Next slide. Okay, how this works. Those of you who are registered for 281 as a course, you get 1 unit of credit. And to earn that 1 unit of credit, this is what you have to do. You attend the seminar and submit 3 questions that you would be interested in asking the speaker. You're welcome to ask the speaker. You don't have to ask the speaker, but I want you to think about 3 questions for each seminar. We've got 8 seminars scheduled. So you've got to do this for 7 of the 8. We give you 1 freebie that lets you off the hook, but you've got to do it for 7 of them. We'd like you to attend the seminar in real time if you can, because we'll have our speakers and it's nice for them to have an audience. And it's great when you're there to ask some real-time questions. So please attend in real time if you can. If you can't attend in real time, we are going to be posting the recordings and those will go up by Tuesday. And Anne-Marie will be putting those in Canvas and sending out the link. So then you can watch the recording and you still need to do your 3 questions. And you should get your questions done before the next seminar, because otherwise you're just going to get behind and things will run together and you're at risk of not getting everything done to get your 1 unit of credit. So that's what you got to do. And then generally, we expect you to be thoughtful and thankful for the guest speakers who are donating their time to share their work with you. Be respectful and all of that. And I'd like that you embrace this opportunity. We're bringing a lot of different people to you to talk about a lot of different aspects of transportation and transportation research. And it really is an opportunity for you to learn things and learn things beyond your own immediate interests. So the reason we do this is to expose you to all of this. And we're really hoping that you're going to fully embrace this great opportunity. Let's see, there was a question in chat. Do we submit the questions for the seminar before we see it or after one seminar before? Right, so after the seminar, or you could be writing the questions during the seminar and just try and get it done before the next seminar, because like I said, then you'll just get behind. You submit the questions in Canvas. There's an assignment set up for each of the seminars. It's actually set up as a quiz, and you just fill in your 3 questions and it gets submitted, and then you'll get your credit. And we'll do a little spot checking to make sure you're taking the exercise seriously. So any other questions about the expectations and how it's going to operate?
Hey, Susan. This is Ray. Just quick question. Can the presentation be shared with us in advance to help us have a better understanding what we are gonna see, so we can form better questions, you know, it helps.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. You know, because I mean, I guess we might have PowerPoints in advance, but yeah, no, you can, you know, if you feel like you need to absorb it more, you can watch it again afterwards. We're not going to grade you on the quality of your questions, and you know, don't you know, if you want to ask a question live of the speaker, just go ahead and do it. You know, there are no bad questions. So
got it.
Yeah, don't worry too much about that. The point is to get you thinking about it. Okay, anything else? Oh, and then we will be setting it up so that if you do want to ask questions, you can unmute and ask your question. And we'll go over this a little more next week when we've actually got a speaker here. But you know, it'd be nice if when you are asking your question, you do what Ray did and turn on your video. But of course, you're not obligated to do that. All right, anything else? Then I'm going to move right along, and feel free to chat questions. Yeah, and I'll try and keep up on the chat box and jump in and answer some questions along the way. So question about, will the questions be answered? Nobody's going to answer your questions unless you ask them live of the speaker. Okay, so this is really just an exercise to make sure you're thinking about the seminar, okay? All right, so I go first, and I'm supposed to introduce you to ITS Davis, which I think all of you have heard something about so far, and all I'm going to say is that we are the world's leading university center on sustainable transportation. And then what ITS is a whole lot of people, including all of you, and the various sorts of centers and initiatives that are housed within ITS. So that's what we're going to look at today, is a whole bunch of those different centers and initiatives. Next slide. So we're going to go through all of this, and feel free to follow up with these people afterwards if you feel like you want to know more. And because we're going to get just a couple of minutes from each of them today. Next slide. So I go first, and what I want to tell you about is the National Center for Sustainable Transportation, which is probably the broadest of the various things housed within ITS. It is a part of a federal program called the University Transportation Centers Program. And what it is a really nice grant that lets us do some really nice things. So next slide. UC Davis is the lead of the NCST, but we have other partners, some down in Southern California, but University of Vermont and Georgia Tech as well. Next slide. And what we do is research. Most of the funding goes to support research projects. I'll say more about that on the next slide. But also education and what we call engagement, trying to get the research out there into the hands of people who might make use of it. Research focus, as I said, very broad, and it mirrors the structure of the TTP program, the tracks for the TTP program. So we fund research in all these areas, and then I think if you hit the button, we get a little animation here. Another thing we're very interested in is institutional change across all of these domains. Okay, next slide. So what's really important for you are the opportunities that the NCST brings to you all. And that includes, as I said, a whole lot of research funding, which means a whole lot of graduate student research positions, or otherwise known as GSR positions. And probably some of you are already working on NCST funded projects. We give out dissertation fellowships, which is very important for you PhD students. You're eligible for these once you've passed your qualifying exam, and we have 2 rounds of applications. So we've got one coming up now. So keep that in mind as a PhD student, that this is funding you can apply for later on. And what's nice is it frees you up from working for somebody else to really focus on your dissertation for some period of time. And then we do a few other things. We have in the past done some graduate student exchanges with those other universities where if one of their students comes here or one of you go there. We're doing that kind of virtually at the moment, but hopefully we'll be doing that in person again in the future. NCST funding has been used to pay for what we call ad hoc courses that we might not otherwise be able to offer because we don't have enough other funding. So this year we have a couple of extra classes, although we're trying to convert these to regular classes as well. But there is an opportunity if there's a topic that we don't have a class on, that we've got 5 or more students who are interested in taking that class, we have the possibility of creating another class. So keep that in mind. And then NCST helps to support the ITS seminar. When we were flying people in, we were using NCST funding to help do that. As I said, we also are very interested in engagement, which means various kinds of workshops and webinars and briefings that we support that students often have an opportunity to get involved with. And I'm sure there are other things as well. It's been a really important program for enriching not just our research program, but also our educational programs. So thank you, federal government, for providing us with this funding. All right, next slide. One more. Okay, so just to confuse things, we are also a member of another one of these university transportation centers. This is called the Pacific Southwest Region, UTC. It is led by University of Southern California, and you can see all the other partners there. So it is focused on California and the Southwest, and Hawaii is a member there as well. So it provides a lot of the same kind of funding, and you probably don't really need to worry about the difference between the two, but just so you know, if you hear PSR, that's what that is. So that was my spiel. I think next up is Dylan, if we're ready to go with that.
Thanks, Susan. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about a new initiative at ITS Davis called the Bicycling Plus Research Collaborative, which I started in January of 2019, so it's very new. But one thing I wanted to just put out to you is that, well, while this research collaborative is new, really bicycling research has been going on at Davis for decades. And if you explore around this website a little bit, you'll see that we have publications dating back to 1976. So Davis has really been a leader in bicycling research for transportation, and all this kind of new website and new initiative is to kind of showcase that and provide some kind of communications to new students and new funding. But I guess before that, I should back up and introduce myself, because I forgot to do that. So my name is Dylan Fitch. I'm a researcher at ITS. I was also a PhD student in TTP. And so I was sitting in your seat not too long ago. And so I started this because I thought that it was surprising to me that with such years of bike research that there was no center focused on it. So I wanted to just walk through this just to give you an idea, and hopefully you guys, if you're interested in bicycling or bike-related research, you can poke around the website. But the current projects you can see span things that are related to bicycling, but also micromobility services. There's some work for the state that we're doing for active transportation program at the state. We have projects related to policy and transit connections for bicycling. So it's really more than just kind of bicycling now. It's spanning kind of new mobility services. And in this collaborative, we also are working across all the other centers that you're going to hear about. So we work with Three Revolutions and Plug-in Electric Hybrid Research Center. So it's not it's not as distinct as some of the other research centers because really micromobility services and bicycling kind of integrate in with all the other transportation options. One last thing I'll point out is if you are interested in specific topics, go look at the research publications page, and we've got kind of our 6 main themes related to the Bicycling Plus Research Collaborative. And there are, you know, a lot of different areas that I'm certainly not an expert in, for example, bicycling and bicycle dynamics. But there are great researchers here at UC Davis if you're interested in these topics. So if you can't find, you know, the person that you, you know, you have a specific interest, just come talk to me or email me, and I'll kind of steer you in the right direction for, you know, pursuing your interest related to bicycling. And then the last thing I do want to point out is, and Susan just mentioned it, is that I'll be teaching this bicycle and pedestrian planning class next winter. So keep an eye out for that.
Great. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Mohammed, who's going to tell us about the UC Pavement Research Center.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So my name is Mohammed Al-Kashif. I'm an associate project scientist at the University of California Pavement Research Center, UCPRC. The director of the research center is Professor John Harvey. He's a professor at the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at UC Davis. UCPRC operates at 2 different locations. So apart from UC Davis, we have also another facility at UC Berkeley. This picture here, this is a layout of our UC Davis location. Shows our offices, our labs, and on the top of the picture, this area where you see the big trailers, this is our accelerated pavement testing facility, and I'll cover some of that briefly during the presentation. Our website is, you can find it here on this slide. There is a lot of information there about what we do and our research, and all of our publications. You will be able to find it on this website. Next slide, please. Our center is mainly funded through the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, Carry Cycle, the federal highways. We also work with the industry to make sure that our research addresses topics of interest to the industry, and also that our research goes beyond just pure research to cover development and implementation of this research at both the state and local levels. Susan, if you can, okay. So we have about 22 full-time staff. We have professional researchers working at the center. We have research and development engineers working full-time, supporting and administrative staff. We also have graduate students working on different areas of pavements, doing their master's and their PhD under the supervision of Professor John Harvey. We also have an opportunity for undergrad students to come and work in the lab. So mainly the undergrad students are handling lab operations and lab testing. 90% of our work is with Caltrans. So Caltrans is our main funding organization. And as a matter of fact, we just entered into a 3-year interagency agreement with Caltrans for $32 million. So the way we're doing our research is that we have one big contract with Caltrans, and under this contract we have several projects that cover different areas of research, and we have what we call a research roadmap. So this research roadmap covers different areas related to pavement. So I see a question here from Trisha. UCPRC is University of California Pavement Research Center. So this is This is what we call our research center. So we have a research roadmap that covers different areas of pavement research, asphalt and concrete pavement. We look at short, medium, and long-term strategic goals. And this research roadmap was developed in working with Caltrans to serve their needs. Next slide. So just to give everyone a taste of what we do and what sort of projects we're working on at UCPRC. One of these projects involved using waste tires in asphalt binder. So we're adding a percentage of waste tire rubber into our pavement. And by doing that, we're preventing these waste tires to go into landfills. And also through research, we've shown that adding this tire rubber, even though it's considered a waste material, it actually helps with the pavement performance. So having this waste tire in the pavement helps with reducing the cracking that's common in pavements. So the next project is recycled asphalt pavement. So what we do with this is that we take the old asphalt. So when it's time to replace old pavements, we remove the old asphalt, and instead of dumping it, we're actually reusing it and recycling it in new pavements. And we're working with Caltrans to introduce methods to be able to recycle the old asphalt and to be able to use as much as 40% of that old asphalt into new pavements. Also, another project which we worked on with CarryCycle is to try and find ways to reduce the emissions from the asphalt production. So if you look at these two pictures here, the picture on the top, this is asphalt being produced at normal hot mix temperatures. And what we did is that we looked at ways to be able to reduce the mixing temperatures, to use lower temperatures while still maintaining the same performance. So the picture below is the same mix being produced at the lower mixing temperatures. And you can easily note the difference in the emissions just by lowering the mixing temperature. Other projects that we're involved in have to deal with asset management, how to maintain the pavement network using different maintenance and rehabilitation techniques. We also look at concepts like life cycle assessment and LCCA, life cycle cost analysis. So looking at the initial and operating costs of different technologies, as well as the environmental impact of these technologies, and then we try to work with state agencies, state and local agencies to help them with the decision-making process. Next slide.
Mohammed, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up so we can.
Okay. Yeah, this is the last slide. So this is just our accelerated pavement testing. So this is where we have to take whatever we did in the lab and try to see and try to validate it using field testing. So in the asphalt pavement testing, we were able to simulate traffic loading that takes place in actual pavements. And then using this information, we go back and validate our lab findings.
Great, thank you very much. As I always say, pavements are far more interesting than I ever thought they were. Okay, next up is Lou Fulton, who's gonna kick off this whole set of centers that fall under the Sustainable Transportation Energy Pathways Plus program.
Thank you, Susan. I'm in the woods today. And I did not set up any slides about STEPS Plus, so I'll just briefly describe it and then we'll get into the 5 programs that are affiliated with it. So this is a research consortium within ITS that includes the 5 programs or centers that you see there on that slide. We restructured the previous STEPS program. STEPS means Sustainable Transportation Energy Pathways. So it's all about transportation and energy and thinking about where things are headed and what's happening now, where things are headed, and where do we want them to be headed in a sustainable future. And we had these different centers in existence, but we kind of pulled them together under this new form of STEPS called STEPS Plus beginning last year, so that we can work more closely together and cooperate even better. And I think it's working very well. It's also a funding consortium. We have about 30 companies and state agencies and federal agency sponsors that contribute grants that are unrestricted research grants that we use to help fund the research that we do in these 5 programs. So it's working very well. There's a lot of cooperation across the centers, and a lot of times it's individuals doing research together, and no one only works for one center, and no student has to only be involved with one center. There's lots of opportunities across all of them. And so I think the important thing is to get into what each one of them does. So why don't we hear from the people from Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Center.
Gil, take it away. Unmute, Gil.
Sorry, hey, thank you. I'm out of the woods, but still kind of in nature, keeping a loose theme on where we should be today or after the seminar. So the Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Research Center, that's a mouthful. 13 years ago, the California Energy Commission wanted to start a new research center on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, these cars that have both an engine and a plug, because no one believed almost 14 years ago that full electric cars will make a comeback and will be a big thing as Tesla today, selling 500,000 cars a year. So they started this plug-in hybrid research center, and immediately after, actually Tesla was starting to sell cars, and Nissan was saying we are going to sell the Nissan Leaf, and things change. And instead of printing out all new papers and changing all the contract, we just added a small end. So we are plug-in hybrid and electric vehicle research center. But as many people are a little bit confused, we are not doing plug-in hybrids research. We are doing everything that is new technologies, electric vehicles, and so on. I'm Gil, I'm the director of this center. I think that I met all of you already under different meetings and things. So it's great to see you also on Friday in the seminar. Our center, as Susan was talking about, NCST and other centers that are more a funnel for money for great research, we are the guys who get the money usually. We are not sending money, we are asking for money. We have a big group of full-time researchers. You have all the names there. Each one work with graduate students and undergrads, and we are together working on many projects that are sponsored by, if you can go to the next slide, sponsor, as Lou said, by this consortium that STEPS Plus is bringing, but also our bread and butter is working for the state of California, for the California Air Resource Board, the California Energy Commission, Caltrans, the federal government, and many other groups and companies that we work with. Now, what that creates, thank you, is that the PHNEV Research Center is a really good center for that have long-term data. We are data holders, surveys for the last 10 years, vehicle data from vehicles, data from infrastructure, and a lot of our projects are building one on the other. So we are not, you know, there are a lot of people, if you open any of the academic journals, you will think that half of the transportation community is doing electric vehicles these days. But these are, in many cases, there is one researcher at the university or one professor that do one study on electric vehicle, which are coming up with really good results. But I think that our unique perspective is that if you do a study on the market of electric cars at the PHNEV Center, you will also know quite a lot about how people are using these vehicles, how people are charging it, the policies, because of all the other stuff that we are doing. Recently, for example, studying Teslas, we had Scott Hardman, one of our lead researchers, figure out that Teslas have a unique behavior because of their autopilot. People drive them differently because of autopilot. And we did a research just because we had this data way ahead of everyone, which was a very interesting topic. Great to collaborate with the 3 Revolution that will come next. And I think that this is my last, or I have just one slide just show, you know, again, combining different data. Right now, we collect a lot of data from households in California that have at least one electric car. If you can see this, can you know this background, this funny background? This is a small logger that we install in cars all over California, in your electric car, and also the other car is in your household. And we know exactly where you are, how much gas you use, how much electricity you use, and everything. And for example, I just dropped here one slide, how Californians were behaving during Corona, knowing exactly where do they travel to, how often do they travel to, do they actually stay at home when they've been told to stay at home, and so on. What we usually do with these loggers is checking if electric cars are performing as we expect them to perform. Is the range enough? Do people plug them where do we expect them to plug them? And we're doing a lot of studies using the data we collected. And next.
Great.
One.
Thank you, Gil.
Thank you very much. That's the thank you one, exactly.
Yeah, interesting data. I think it reflects the demographics of your group.
They were driving 300 miles a week before Corona.
Yeah.
They were driving a lot, exactly.
All right, Giovanni, you're up next.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And many of you already know me because I'm actually in my class that I'm teaching this quarter on travel survey design and data collection. But I'm Giovanni Circella. I'm the director of the 3 Revolutions Future Mobility Program, which is a relatively younger research and policy program that was established only 3 years ago. So we don't have the long history of the center from Gil, but also we're doing quite a bit of activities already. Next slide, please. So our program was really born to investigate the changes brought to transportation by the new technologies. And this covers a lot of different areas from the car sharing programs, all the new shared mobility services, the mobility on demand, the app-based services, but also all the new revolutions. And one of the latest ones is micromobility and e-scooters in cities. And then in the future, there is also the question about automation and how this will change really transportation. Anne-Marie, let's go to the next slide, please. So I recommend all of you read the great book, The 3 Revolutions, that Dan Sperling wrote, and it was really serving as an inspiration for our research and policy program at UC Davis. And next slide. And in our program, we're really focusing on how these transportation revolutions are affecting vehicle ownership and travel behaviors. And our research activities, next slide, include a number of different areas. We do data collection and analysis of a lot of different data sets we collect in different ways. We do forecasting and simulation models to understand the impacts on transportation and vehicle ownership. We do some behavioral experiments, especially for those technologies which are not widely available on the market yet. And then a lot of work on policy analysis, simulation of future transportation scenarios, and analysis of environmental, economic, or equity impacts of these new technologies in transportation. Next slide. We have already collected a lot of data in different locations and in different years. So really for those that are interested in this topic, we can support a number of different analyses and a number of different topics for research. But maybe a different way to look at this, next slide, is also to look at where we have data from. So we have quite a bit of data in the US, in California, in other cities in the US. We've been doing a large COVID-19 study to study the impacts on the mobility during the pandemic. One more click, Anne-Marie. We are working with colleagues in other universities in the US, and so we have also data in other regions of the US. Next slide. And then we have data that we have collected in several areas in the developing countries. So we have data in particular in South America, in Asia, in several parts of the world. And we are collaborating on a number of analyses. One more click, Anne-Marie, please. In Europe and Latin America through a number of partnerships. And so we are actually writing several different interesting research papers with colleagues in England, in Germany, and Chile. One more slide, please. So a lot of the work, this is an example, for instance, of one publication. This was a work that one student before you was working with Susan and me and other colleagues at UC Davis, and that we published in a very nice journal, in Journal of Choice Modeling. And this was, for instance, about identifying differences in the adoption of technologies among different groups of users. And this is the type of work that we do a lot, understanding different behaviors, different characteristics of the users, but also under what circumstances people adopt technology. One more slide. And if you want more information, I really invite you to check our two websites, I would say. The main website, 3rep.ucdavis.edu, where you can find a lot of information about all our activities and projects, including a list of all our recent publications and details about key findings for our projects. But also we have created this new post-COVID-19 mobility.ucdavis.edu, because really a lot of our work these days is really trying to fleshing out how mobility will look like after the pandemic. And so here we are grouping all our activities, and there is a lot of work that we're doing, and actually several people in the audience here are already working on those projects. And happy to talk more, but this was just a little bit of introduction to our activities.
Great, thank you, Giovanni. Speaking of international work, let's turn to Yun Shi, who's going to tell us about the China Center.
Hi, this is Yun Shi Wang from China Center. We are one of the older centers. We are a few months established before the PHEV Center, but we are very small. We work mostly with the other centers at ITS. Next page. So as you can see, that all the directors are our advisors, and we have quite a few international students as well. Next page. And one of the things we do is we function as a platform. We established the US-China Zero Emission Vehicle Policy Lab, and then we invite the Chinese government to California. We show them the data and also the policy by the California government, especially the zero emission vehicle policy. So in August 2015, we had a ZEV discussion workshop at Asilomar, and where the Chinese government decided to adopt the zero emission vehicle mandate. And at the same time, VW was confessing next door about the Dieselgate. Next page. Yeah, so it's next door. And then we were expanded into China, California, US, and Netherlands zero emission vehicle policy with the blessing of quite a few government officials, including Governor Jerry Brown, the Minister of the Netherlands. Next page. So this one is a reflection of our collaboration with our other centers. Austin Brown and Lou Fulton are now chairing a program to study carbon neutral by 2045 in the transportation sector. At the same time, the Chinese government just announced that they will have carbon neutral by 2060. So we are initiating a study on the carbon neutral in transportation sector in China. As you can see, I just want to point out the orange line on the top. That's the transit buses. The 70% of the transit buses produced in China are now zero emission vehicles. So there is a possibility that China will be ahead of California or the United States. Next page. We have other research plans, research plan on electric vehicle growth scenario in China, and we have a case study of logistic vehicles electrification best practice and cost benefit analysis. We worked with the World Bank on a case study of Shenzhen, which will be published soon. Next page. And we also are initiating a study on the effect of first bike lane, special highway in Beijing. And we heard it's very popular, so we want to know what's going on. And we're also engaged in a micro-transit service in Sacramento. Next page. So we have other plans for some other studies. So these are all our plans for our this year's study. Okay. Next page. I think these are our sponsors. We are mostly supported by foundations. Foundations are very important to us. I think this is all about the China Center. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Alan Jen's up next.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. So I am Assistant Director for the Energy Futures program. And so I'll give a little bit of background about what we do here. Next slide. So this is kind of the research team behind a lot of the research that's going on here. It's actually one of the newest centers or programs in ITS. And so the projects that we're working on are sort of up and coming, but pretty exciting. And so the main idea behind the Energy Futures program is to think about, these really long scale transitions towards alternative fuel technologies in transportation, but also thinking about transportation in a sort of system basis. So thinking about how it interacts with things like the energy system. And I think the best way to kind of highlight the type of research that we're doing is to give a sort of quick overview of some of the bigger projects that we have going on here. So go ahead to the next slide. Some of the project plans for 2020, there's this big study going on right now that ITS is developing for the California EPA that's looking at a transition towards zero emissions by 2045. And so that involves researchers from all the centers in ITS, including the role that Energy Futures is playing in trying to figure out, how the technologies are going to transition, what's that going to do to impact our energy systems, what's that going to look like for emissions, and so we've got that going on. Another project is looking at a really high resolution spatial representation of a transition to hydrogen system, specifically in California. And so this is this really large system model that's integrating travel demand, infrastructure, the electricity grid. And actually, I can talk a little bit more about that in just a second. We've got some projects looking at secondhand vehicle flows around the world and what that means for electric vehicle adoption, as well as implications for battery use and management, particularly end of life. We have actually, this is, I would almost even say, part of the first two projects, thinking about the integration of the electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles. So as these new technologies roll out, how are they going to integrate with the electricity grid? And then we've got a wide variety of projects looking at LCFS, which is the low carbon fuel standard. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's a policy developed in California that has actually gone and expanded to a couple other areas such as in Canada. And so these projects are understanding sort of the policy implications and what are the impacts of having this policy. Yeah, okay, and I don't want to get too bogged down in details about all these projects, but hopefully this outline gives a nice sort of overview and sense of the scope and type of work that we do. So next slide. Yeah, and so regarding...
You want me to pick up on that one, Alan?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Lou.
so
briefly.
Yeah. We have two more slides to just quickly mention a couple of projects. So this is a summary snapshot of this California Transitions Project that is all about getting to carbon neutrality by 2045. And it's pretty interesting because the governor about a week and a half ago said that he wants to target, and that he's an executive order that we will target reaching 100% ZEV vehicle sales by 2035. So we're looking hard at that and what it means for how fast you can transition, getting rid of fossil fuels, moving to renewable fuels, and cutting CO2 emissions. So that we'll have a report on that in another month or so, and it's a very interesting project. Next one, back to Alan.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So this is sort of to provide some perspective about the level of detail that we're getting into and the sort of system level integration. And so if you want to click forward a couple times, I could just go through this really quickly. So thinking about travel demand, so where cars and trucks are moving, technology choice, so thinking about, as we switch from gas and diesel to electric and hydrogen, where are we going to need the fueling infrastructure to be placed in order to meet those demands and those specific technologies? How does that going to interact with the electricity grid? What power plants are going to be turning on to meet those demands, right? Are you going to be using from clean solar? Are you going to be using from natural gas? And if we do use this sort of increased electricity demand, where are those emissions coming from, and how are those changing? And then those outcomes are all going to, all of these sort of different parameters are related to decisions being made from policy. And so we want to be able to reflect different sorts of policy decisions into our modeling. And so that's when I'm talking about like a systems approach, this is really an integration of many sort of different modeling disciplines all coming together to make this sort of large scale model. Yeah, and so I'll leave it at that. I want to make sure everyone gets enough time, but yeah, again, if anyone has any questions, later on, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I mean, I think you all out there can see how policy-oriented our research is, that we're really trying to have an impact on policy and decision-making. And a lot of overlap in people in all these initiatives, which make things a little confusing, but a lot of wonderful synergies and collaborations go on around here. So next up is Miguel to talk about sustainable freight.
Thank you, Susan. So this is a Sustainable Freight Research Center. So we actually going in the same token of the previous speakers. We are the youngest center, but we have 3 co-directors, Lou Fulton, Marshall Miller, and myself. And we have been operating for 2 years as a center. So we focus on kind of vehicle technology related to freight and also freight operations and logistics. And here is kind of the description of the researchers and some staff and students that are working in the center. We have, as I mentioned, we have the 2 tracks, the technology and vehicles and the logistics. Marshall Miller, we're going to talk about some of the findings in recent years from the first track, and then I'll give you a little bit of hints of what we also do in the operations and logistics.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. So for most types of electric and fuel cell trucks, fuel savings can be significant because the fuel economy increase due to the battery electric fuel cell truck is significant. Unfortunately, that's not true for a particular type of truck known as long haul, the trucks that drive primarily on the highway. Diesel trucks have very high efficiency, and so for a fuel cell long haul truck, the increase in fuel economy might only be 30% or so. And that's not enough to overcome the increase in hydrogen cost over diesel. So the problem with fuel cell long-haul trucks is that you don't get this fuel cost savings. And certainly in the beginning, the vehicles are going to cost more. So the overall cost to own and operate a long-haul truck will be projected to be more expensive for a while. And so you might think of using battery electric for long-haul trucks. Problem with battery electric is that the battery needs to be very large to get a significant range, say 500 miles. That battery will weigh a lot and will cut into the payload. So battery electric trucks are also a potential problem. So there's not an obvious good solution in terms of zero emission technology for that particular application. And that's something we'll be looking at in more detail. Very recently, the California Air Resources Board passed passed the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, which is one of the most advanced and aggressive regulations requiring market penetration of zero emission vehicles. Some truck types will need to go from essentially zero to 75% of new truck sales to be zero emission vehicle by 2035. That's extremely aggressive. We've been looking at this rule and trying to understand what needs to be done in order to prepare for the rule. And we've looked at things like incentives for vehicles, and in particular, incentives for infrastructure and bringing the various groups together to make sure that the infrastructure is in place and in the proper place such that when the vehicles show up, that the fleets can make use of them. So I'll turn it back over to Miguel for the next couple of bullets.
So in addition to what Marshall was mentioning, we have also been looking into what will be the bottom line impact of some of these regulations into how companies operate. Will there be an equitable impact across large fleets or smaller owner operators that only have one or two trucks, that they may not be able to afford the larger new rigs, even with the increased monetary values of the incentives? So we look into those economic impacts as well. And then we also look into what have to change in the way these fleets and companies operate to be able to accommodate some of the current technological constraints, such as range or payload. On the other hand, we also need to acknowledge what needs to change on the technology to be able to accommodate the needs of these particular fleets. I mean, we cannot go away of having to transport heavy loads, that they still need to be transported. So how do we come to a balance between those kind of challenges in the operations and technology? And we also pay attention to not only the long haul, but we go all the way down to the last mile and the last few feet of deliveries, even when you're getting your food from the nearest restaurant, even from a car that is driving or even a robot. And we also been looking about how companies are positioning themselves and redesigning their distribution network, where are they putting logistic facilities such as warehouses and distribution centers to accommodate these changes. And then next please, we have been looking about one of the biggest and most impactful drivers of change that have been e-commerce, where now every household, every home becomes a destination of cargo. And recently we did this analysis where we took into consideration what is better. Is it better to go to the stores, or is it better to have everything delivered to you? And actually we found that in the best case, e-commerce, trucks delivering to you or cars delivering cargo to your household could be better. However, there have been current trends such as really expedite deliveries, rush deliveries, same-day deliveries that actually are going away from the savings that the freight system can achieve by consolidating cargo. So we have been working a lot on that sense. And recently, we have been looking about what had happened during COVID when everybody had to stay home. And now instead of going out to eat or going back out to buy deliveries or groceries, then most of it had to come to our households. So we have been looking about the changes in travel patterns. And I think some of my colleagues have also mentioned that we have been looking about these changes and trends from different perspectives, from the micromobility, from the use of plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles, from the telecommuting, but also then what have been the substitution effect between people going out to buy stuff or that stuff having to come to your household, and what will be the short-term to long-term impact. So we have been working on that. And then finally, Marshall will take it to another important project that we are developing.
Okay, really briefly. Really briefly.
Okay, next slide. I don't know who's controlling slides.
Oh.
Okay,
Lost one.
then we're done.
Well, let's move on. Let's go on to the next talk.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Yeah, really interesting work. Mostly, you know, we're focused on people around here, but the freight is so critical. Okay, now we're going to turn to the Policy Institute, Austin Brown, which again is a different sort of activity affiliated with that.
Hi, Susan. Thanks, and nice to see everybody. Yeah, we are, like, I think each of our centers are both our own unique snowflake, and yet we all work together on all of these different projects. So if you're sitting here thinking, I can't tell how all of these different things are organized, you're not alone. It's tough for people who've been here for years to figure out how it all works together. In my opinion, it mostly comes down to people and the people who work together on each of these individual topics. So I'll talk briefly about the Policy Institute, which I've been directing since 2017. We work with many of the, I think I would say actually with all of the individual centers and other pieces of ITS Davis in various capacities. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering why we have a Policy Institute. It's unusual, I think, for an Institute of Transportation Studies to be associated with a Policy Institute, or at least it's not universally common. If our main goals are to help increase the impact of UC Davis research and research more generally, Susan mentioned that the ITS researchers in general are extremely policy focused and want to have impact from their work. So our goal is to really help facilitate that process. And then we do also conduct some directly policy focused research where the topic and expertise is a good fit. So as a few examples, we're managing a study with ITS and 3 other universities on a carbon neutral transportation system by 2045. So what are the policies to get us to carbon neutral transportation? We support outreach and engagement for our Community Smart Transportation Communities Consortium project. So we can often have a small role in a big project trying to help increase the outreach and awareness and policy impact. And then we write and participate in process of developing documents like policy briefs, issue papers, and many more sort of outreach focused materials. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So our main motivation is, even though we all want to have a policy impact with our research, wanting to do so and doing so is easier said than done. So I can say anecdotally, we find that in general, research doesn't always meet its expected or intended audience. We don't always see that the policymakers pick up a study and use it in the way that we might sort of hope that they would. And then there's also weaknesses on the researcher side too, where we don't always think about how to make the work most directly useful as possible. So one example of this was from a review paper by Marsden and Reardon in 2017, where they reviewed 100 papers posted in Transport Policy, which is explicitly a transportation policy focused journal. And they found that only 13% of them considered specific aspects of the policy cycle, so how this actually might get used in policymaking. And 2/3 didn't engage with any real world policy examples or policymakers. So I'm sure there's definitely some research that doesn't need to have policy implications, but if you're going to publish in a policy journal, we should probably be doing a little bit more to do this kind of real world engagement. So where do we actually collaborate? So we work with researchers at all stages of the research process and during application for funding, so identifying relevant opportunities and helping write proposals. During performance, we will help work directly with policymakers on what their needs are and what input they think we should be trying to help provide. We also do supplemental analysis in terms of looking at the research and saying, okay, so what is the next step? What does this actually mean for the policy process? And we do a lot of work on communications, supporting researchers on helping write policy-related journal articles, building connections through things like workshops, seminars, and other ways to engage directly with the people who can actually take this work and implement it, and then outreach like policy briefs and blog posts that I mentioned. So next slide. We think about the work that we do as mostly living at the top of this sort of research pyramid. So at the bottom of the research pyramid is data. If you're not using data, then it's probably not research. And then the primary literature builds on that and has some interpretations. Then that's often assembled into a review article and then often summarized in a shorter policy brief. And these products are getting sort of shorter and simpler. And so the challenge is making sure that with the summary materials, we're still preserving the truth of the research and the quality of the research, but also summarizing the outcomes in a way that's directly useful for various kinds of policy making. And then we look all the way up to the top where we think about wanting to be able to summarize even big, complicated projects with something like a bumper sticker or a Twitter post, and really being able to help get the word out there about the research that's being done for people who don't necessarily follow all of the primary literature. Next slide. So we don't just do transportation. We work in varying amounts in 6 areas of focus. We work on energy systems, so looking at things like the electric grid and integration of renewable energy. I mentioned, of course, sustainable transportation. This is where so far been by far the largest area of focus, really because of the huge amount of excellent policy focused work that ITS does. But we also work on topics related to water and ecosystems. Increasingly, we're doing much more critical work on environmental justice, the future of the cities, and then all of these actually tie together, right? So I mentioned energy systems, environmental justice. These all tie into transportation when you look at charging electric vehicles or producing fuel, when we look at the impacts that the transportation system has on equity and local pollution. So we don't think of these in isolation. And then in the bottom right, one thing that ties all of the work together is this focus on needing to get to a carbon neutral or climate neutral California and world. And so we're really always thinking about how each of these topic areas relates to our urgent need to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So this is our team. We're 7 full-time staff, so we're a lean and mean group working on a variety of different technical topics listed there on the top. And then we always, and this is one of the main things I want to share with everyone here, we're always very grateful to host students and affiliated researchers. And actually, I've just realized I've neglected to add our newest student onto this list. So Jarell, I haven't seen if you're on the participants list, but I haven't forgotten. We will get you onto this slide, and apologies for that. So at any given time, we'll have a mix of students, researchers, affiliated researchers, and we're really always happy to collaborate either sort of formally or more informally. If you're finishing up a research project, starting a research project, and you're thinking, I think this probably has a policy implication, but I don't quite know who to connect with and who to talk to about it and what to do with it once the research starts to get into the results phase. So if that is the kind of question that's coming up, reach out to me, any of my colleagues. We're always happy to think through your project and help facilitate identifying policymakers who might be interested in your findings, and also help keep you up to date on the policy process. We track all of the major related bills in the state legislature every year, and all the various rulemakings and things that affect our work. So always happy to have an informal chat, and then if it makes sense, collaborate on some of these policy publications. The last plug I'll give is on the next slide, which is we approximately monthly convene a gathering called Policy and Popcorn. When we were able to be in the same place, this literally had popcorn. We have a cool red popcorn machine that hopefully we'll get to fire up again someday. In the meantime, it's bring your own popcorn, but we still do bring the policy. So we have approximately monthly gatherings to talk about various policy-related topics. Later this month, we'll have a session on Know Your Ballot. So looking at the various propositions and measures that we all read, and it feels like it takes a PhD in political science to understand any one of them. We'll go through a few with some experts, both locally in Davis, as well as some California propositions and measures that are, I think, pretty instructive from an environmental policy perspective. And then just stay tuned. You can sign up and get notified. And if there's a topic you want us to dive into, let me know. We are always looking for interesting speakers to bring in and interesting conversations to have about the intersection of policy and research. So I will wrap it up there, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Austin. That's great. And I do encourage all of you to check out those policy and popcorn and policy sessions. I'm really looking forward to the one on the ballot because of all of our measures. And just thanks to the Policy Institute for really upping our game in terms of having a policy impact with our research. Okay, so the last 3 speakers, we're going to turn to some student led initiatives that we hope you all will think about getting involved with. So Jean's going to talk about student energy.
Thank you, Susan. So hi, everyone. My name is Jean G, and I'm a second-year PhD student in the Energy Graduate Group. I'm here today to talk to you about a student organization on campus. It's called Student Energy at UC Davis. Next slide, please. So jumping into who we are a student organization primarily comprised of graduate students. We were founded just last year by 2 students. One of them is actually a TTP student. Some of them may be familiar with him, Anish. So our mission is to build a community of energy leaders, share cross-disciplinary knowledge about the energy system, and take action to transition from a resilient, decarbonized, and equitable energy future. We're also part of a global charity that's Student Energy, and their mission is very closely in line with what we're trying to do at a more local level on our Davis campus. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the global movement is actually really impactful. They've engaged over 50,000 students over 100 countries, and they ran events on 5 continents, really bringing together student leaders in the energy space, and creates this network of leaders who are interested in getting involved on energy-related issues. Next slide, please. So the following slides, I'm going to talk more about our local chapter and what we do and how you can get involved. So currently we host bi-weekly discussion meetings to engage students on different aspects of the clean energy transition. We have built our listserv to include 80 students, and I've seen a lot of familiar names today on our Zoom call right now. We have 20 active members, and we're always looking to expand our reach, and we love for you to get involved. And currently I am recruiting for our executive team, so that's you can take a bigger role in shaping what the future of our chapter looks like. Next slide. Last quarter, we moved online and we organized bi-weekly seminars with experts from both the industry and academia. We covered a wide range of topics, including a lot that are relevant to transportation and urban planning. So there's definitely a variety of topics that we're trying to include and learn from. So this quarter, we're hoping to focus on climate and energy justice. Next slide, please. In addition to having these webinars that are very interactive and knowledge sharing, we're also hoping to engage more students as well as the general public. So we created a website to showcase and share our educational contents. We have a blog and a resources page that are live right now. You can go check them out on the website here. We're hoping to elaborate on the blog and resources page this year. So if you would like to share your ideas, we're happy to hear from you. Next slide, please. So lastly, I just want to end with my contact information for those of you who are interested in getting involved. The most direct way is to also go to our website and the Contact Us tab to sign up for our newsletter. I'll also follow up with Emery with a list of ways to sign up in a follow-up email. But yeah, thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you there.
Great, thank you, Jean. Yeah, check it out. Our next group is what's known as WTS, and Coral and Sonia are going to tell us about WTS.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I see some familiar names here. Actually, with me, it's Nina. I'm Coral. I'm a PhD student with TTP, and I'm the treasurer of WTS at UC Davis. And Nina.
Hi, I'm Nina. I'm the communications chair. I'm a 3rd-year undergraduate studying civil engineering.
So what is WTS? It stands for Women Transportation Seminar, kind of outdated acronym. We prefer today to say Advancing Women, Advancing Transportation. It's a nonprofit organization internationally that you can find many chapters of in big cities in the US. As an organization, we believe that we can achieve a strong transportation industry through the advancement of women in our industry. And we are at UC Davis. We are a student chapter of the Sacramento chapter that supports us and our activities. And what we do here as a student chapter, we are a professional student organization registered with UC Davis, and we are hosting guest speakers and information sessions, workshops, social activities, and most of all, networking. We have a good history of students who are interested in transportation from all kinds of majors that found through our networking activities their job after graduation. So yes, Nina.
Next slide, please. So for fall, yesterday we had our first event. We're doing remote activities. We had a trivia night, which was super fun, testing everybody's knowledge of transportation. And then coming up, we have a PhD panel discussing equity in transportation, a career planning workshop that will be hosted by the UC Davis Internship and Career Center. So they'll be helping with resumes, LinkedIn, all that kind of thing. And then hopefully not everybody's too busy in December. So we will be doing a movie premiere of Snowpiercer through Netflix. If you are interested in joining, you can like us on Facebook, and here's our link. And you can also from there sign up for our listserv.
It's important for me to note that our chapter is open for all genders. We always have mixed genders coming to our events. It's not only for women. You are welcome to support the advancement of women, whatever gender you are. Oh, I see. The scholarship word kind of messed up, but about our scholarships. So the chapter at Sacramento is giving every year 4 scholarships, two for graduate, 2 for undergrad, and some more prizes. And we are encouraging you to apply. If you are identified as a woman, the scholarships are a great way to connect with our chapter and with the Sacramento chapter to get money, obviously, and to network with all the people who are supporting women in transportation. So I'm going to put in the chat all these links and the scholarship information. We are really welcome you to join to our events, and we are always recruiting more board members. So if you are interested in helping us to have this chapter alive, you are welcome to contact us.
Great, thank you. And thank you for really reviving this wonderful organization on the UC Davis campus. Last but not least, we're going to hear from Sequoia about the Transportation Equity and Mobility Justice Working Group.
All right, I don't have any slides, and I also had to log in from my phone because Davis is awesome with internet. So thanks everyone. It's welcome to all the new students and to the returning students. It's really great to be able to join you on our first day of seminar. And just as a plug for WTS, last year I actually was a recipient of one of their scholarships, and it was a really great event to just go and connect with folks. But that, of course, was when we could go places. So I still recommend applying if you can. But I'm here right now to talk about the Mobility Justice Working Group that we started on campus about a year and a half ago. Sarah Gradura and I saw an opportunity to fill a gap in kind of what we were doing in ITS around equity and justice. And so we started the working group with the intention of just learning about transportation equity research that was out there.
Sequoia, you're muted. Somehow you got muted.
I'm sorry. So, I'm glad I'm the last one. So last spring quarter, we had about 8 speakers from all over the world talking to us about their research around transportation equity. But more importantly, we're trying to bring a strong mobility justice lens into all of our research at UC Davis, and especially in ITS. And we really have a vision of creating a mobility justice hub of researchers at UC Davis. And so we have participated in a gathering, a convening of folks from all around, including Dr. Susan Handy and one of our newest faculty, Dr. Jesus Barajas. Dr. Sarah McCullough in the Feminist Research Institute is a huge backer and proponent of this and has really made this possible. But as you can see, we're growing, and you know, we're trying to put the quality into qualitative, and just sort of challenge notions of what is data and how to go about doing this work in as much of a justice perspective as possible. And so for those of you that also were part of MobQuest, we had a great seminar there. But stay tuned. We'll have some speakers coming up and opportunities to connect with our group, and we look forward to pushing boundaries and pushing the narrative with you this upcoming year. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think there's a reading group planned, hopefully, for winter quarter that might link our students to students at other UC campuses. So
right, so yeah, there's another opportunity outside of this working group, the equity reading group, that's going to be multiple campuses, multiple UC campuses. So that'll be a really awesome opportunity to speak with students from all around. I'm really excited for that. So stay tuned.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you to all our speakers today. We're just right about on time, which is fabulous. Hopefully you students have gotten a good sense of all the very interesting kinds of things going on around ITS. You've gotten a sense of the people involved in ITS. ITS really is about people and the work that we're doing. And that students are very much a part of this community. So welcome to you all, and please feel free to follow up with anybody if you want to know more. And then just a reminder to submit your 3 questions, whatever has come to mind through this seminar today, and get those questions submitted via Canvas as soon as possible, but definitely before next Friday's seminar. So with that, I'll say have a good weekend, and I can hang out for a bit if anybody's got questions. I see some of the other speakers are still around, but certainly if you have questions about some of the logistics of the seminar, happy to answer questions.